probably think the Thunder Looper at Alton Towers disappeared in the 90s. Well, it didn't. And by the end of this video, I will tell you exactly where it is. From Blackpool to Mexico, from Camelot to Croatia, and from Pleasure Island to Indonesia. These are the UK rides you thought were gone forever. Today, I'm going to cover 15 of them that you can still get on. Let's start with something that is actually still in the UK then, but actually from recent posts I've put on Facebook, some of you did not know this was a thing. Some of you will remember Space Invader or Space Invader 2 at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This was an indoor coaster. Sadly did have an incident on it, but it closed in the park in the early 2000s, and it still operates to this day in Breen Theme Park as Astrostorm. Now I managed to get on this last year. It's not the most thrilling coaster by any stretch of the imagination, but I was very happy to get on it. And this park almost closed this year, so make sure you check it out. Right, the next one I'm sure many of you already know, but there used to be a ride at Southport Pleasureland known as Traumatizer. It's a Vekoma SLC, which typically aren't the most comfortable or popular rides, although I do believe it was much more comfortable back then when it sported the red colour scheme. As many of you already know, it is now at Blackpool Pleasure Beach known as Infusion. And fun fact for you, it got that name because, well, the space for the old log flume that it currently sits in was only just big enough. In fact, I think there's only 1 metre on either side, so they quite literally infused it into that space. Right, a park that many of you have fond memories of is American Adventure. Now, sadly, I never got to experience this park, but as I say, I know many of you have talked about it in the comments. One of the coasters that they had there, their Vekoma shuttle coaster, known as Missile, still exists to this day, and is actually still here in the UK. It is down in Pleasurewood Hills, and is currently known as Wipeout. Now, last year it got given a new train. Not particularly a fan of the restraints on it, but it does still exist and is actually okay to ride. So get down to Pleasurewood and check it out. It's not just the big coasters that have moved on, because there's a little coaster here from Alton Towers that many of you will remember, known as the Beastie. Now this operated in the early 2000s and then it left the park. Now, it's a little Pinfari coaster and it is currently known as Dragon's Challenge over in Barry Island in Wales. A park that has been going in a really strange direction in the last few years is Lightwater Valley. They have basically been stripping out everything thrilling and going down this very, very kids sort of path. However, it has changed owners recently, and they've said they're planning on expanding that back out to a much wider product offering, which I'm super excited about. However, they used to have an attraction known as Super Looper. Now this attraction then moved from there to American Adventure for 10 years, where it was known as Twin Looper. Currently, however, it is over in Poland. Now, I'll put the name on screen because I don't speak Polish, but it translates to Devil's Loop, and it is currently in Legendia, a park that you may have heard of for another coaster known as Let Coaster. Next up we have the Corkscrew, and I don't mean the one that you're thinking of, not the one in Towers, because all that's left of that is the loop outside the park. No, I mean the one that used to be in Flamingo Land, and it left in 2011 to make way for Sick. Well, this now lives over in France in Luna Park, and it goes by the name Apocalypse. Right, you often hear me complaining about the lack of coasters up here in Scotland, but that wasn't always the case. There used to be a park up here over in Ayrshire known as Loudon Castle, and actually quite a few of the attractions from there still live on. One of those is Twist and Shout. Now this is a Schwarzkopf coaster. It's actually bounced around a few UK parks before ending up where it is. It was in Camelot known as Tower of Terror, it was in Dreamland Margate known as Looping Star, and it currently operates as the Big Blue in Damaland over in Croatia. Right, sticking with Scotland, and a park that you all know I love so much, and that is M&D's. Well, it used to have coasters, believe it or not, and the coaster in question is Looping Star. Now, this is a Pinfari Cyclone model, which left the park and currently operates over in Egypt, in a park known as Wonderland. Right, we're back about halfway through the list, so make sure if you're enjoying this you hit that like button and consider subscribing, and stick around to the end so we find out what happened to Thunderlooper. Right, there's another Pinfari Zyklon model that I've found. It used to be the Gauntlet over in Camelot. Now, sadly I never visited Camelot, but I did do a whole history series on that, so if you want a trip down memory lane, make sure you check that out. Well, it turns out that this ride now lives over in Bulgaria in Luna Park, where it goes by the name of Loop Max Adrenaline. Right, heading back up to Yorkshire, and this time we're going into Flamingo Land again for a ride that actually had a little bit of trouble. If you want to know about that trouble, make sure you check the history series for Flamingo Land. The ride in question was Bullet. Now, this ride is another Schwarzkopf, which I'm actually surprised how many of these still exist, because they are getting harder and harder to find. But this one now lives all the way over in Mexico. It's still known as Bullet, but it is in Selva Magica. This next coaster only operated for 3 years at Alton Towers, but I've heard about it quite a bit, so I'm sure you have as well, and that is the Alton Mouse. Now, it's a little Vekoma family coaster. From what I can tell, it seemed to operate next to the towers. However, I found pictures of it where it had a yellow track, and I have pictures of it with an orange track. Given the short lifespan at the park, I'm not sure if it actually did have two colour schemes or if I've just found really faded photos, so let me know in the comments down below. But when it left the park, it headed over to the US, and it is currently in Pennsylvania, known as Wild Mouse, in Idlewild and Soak Zone. Right, the next one was sponsored by an ice cream company of all things, so we're going to go back to Flamingo Land, and this time we're going to go to Magnum Force. Now, this was another Schwarzkopf, and it had that iconic triple loop, which probably explains its new name. It was red and white when it was in the park. It now lives over in America in Indiana Beach, where it operates as the all-American triple loop. Another UK park that unfortunately closed its doors 10 years ago is Pleasure Island Theme Park. Now, they had a Vekoma Boomerang coaster, which was, well, known as Boomerang, and it operated there for 20 years. Now, it left the park when the park closed, and it is currently known as Boomerang Challenge over in Indonesia in the park Trans Studio Bali. Right, this next ride you might not want to go on for two different reasons. The first one is the ride itself. So it used to be known as the Terrorizer, or Circulator was another name I believe, at Flamingo Land. Now, when I spoke, it's a Fabry Evolution ride. When I spoke to Joe from TPI, who had been on this ride, he said it certainly lived up to the name Terrorizer because it was terrifying and not the most comfortable thing. The other reason you might not want to go on it is where it's currently located, because it's in a park, Baghdad Island, in Iraq. So that brings us to the ride that I opened teasing about, and that is of course Thunderlooper at Alton Towers. Now, this was an iconic ride in the park. They got in a lot of trouble for this ride though, for noise complaints, but also this ride had an interesting effect on the local wildlife because it caused the cows to mate at the wrong time of year. Anyway, the ride does still exist. It is now over in Brazil in Hopi Hari, and it is known as Catapult. There you go, there's a selection of attractions that have left the UK and are operating elsewhere. I'd love to know which ones of these you have been on, either in their original location or indeed where they live nowadays. As always, I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.